Okay, good morning. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting. Mr. Brown is joining us remotely. Dave, can you hear us?
I can. Good morning.
Good morning. So this should be a pretty quick meeting. We have 3 new policies to have a first look at, and I will pass it over to Marge to fill us in.
So all 3 policies reflect things that the district is already doing, but to have a policy on our website that the board endorses gives notice to our employees of the type of conduct we expect. So the policy 2700 regarding retention of electronic records and information, I did run this by Jeff Adams, and he said that this absolutely reflects what we're doing. The policy regarding holds in the destruction of electronic evidence and paper records, policy 2800. When we're notified that the district may be the subject of a lawsuit, we immediately consult with either our attorneys or KERMA, and they give us the appropriate message to send to staff, which usually comes through my office. And finally, policy 3175, conduct governing procurements under a federal award. Again, we don't get a lot of federal money because we're not a part of the National School Lunch Program, but some of the recent COVID grants would qualify, and it's just a standard of conduct that we need employees to know what we expect. And so these are really Shipman and Goodwin's model policies to give employees notice in these 3 areas.
Great, thank you, Marge. I read over them and they seem very straightforward, and I didn't have any questions. Dave or Tara, do you have any questions?
Well, Marge, these are basically what we already do, right? This is just a matter of codifying it, because as I read through them, I'm aware we do most of these things. Okay.
Absolutely. But
I just had a quick question on the grant policy in 2 CFR 318. There's some additional language in there in the actual statute that talks about us as an entity and us dealing with affiliates, and some notice disclosures that have to be made by the board as opposed to notice given to the employees. I was just wondering, since the scope's a little bigger in the statute, is that somewhere else in our policies that I didn't see, or is that something we don't need to cover at this point? And if we don't need to expand the scope, just curious as to why.
Can you say what policy you were looking at again? It's a little hard to.
I know it's a little hard. I'm sorry, I'm at the bus stop right now and I don't have the policy in front, but regarding the grants.
Was it 3175?
It's 318. It's the first. It's 2 CFR, I think 200.318. It's the general one. I want to say subsection D in there. I can provide that to Marge. It's not a problem.
Yep, no, I can see it now. I'm sorry, Ms. Brown, I don't know what the question was.
So if you look at the actual underlying policy in the CFR, there are requirements in terms of what disclosures we have to make. Generally, there's another statute which refers to the school lunch program. And what I'm just questioning is the general policy under that has obligations for employees. It also has obligations for us, the Board of Ed, as an entity that receives federal grants. I didn't see us touching on any of those requirements in this particular statute, which may be due to the fact that we're only dealing with school lunch and we have those requirements covered in another policy. I just didn't see it. I just wanted to have reference. Or then my question is, why are we have the scope only dealing with the school lunch when, as you mentioned, this is dealing with some other grants that we've recently received. So I just was trying to figure out the breadth of why we're looking at this policy only in terms of school lunch or not school lunch, or I can certainly follow up, Marge, with some specifics.
Dave, my read of it, and Marge, maybe this will clarify, is that we say including the expenditure of Connecticut school nutrition, but not exclusively, which is where some of the new federal grants that we're receiving because of COVID will come into play. So I think your concern about are we limited to school lunch will be answered there, but I think that's
right. And that
I would just ask Marge to take a look at the underlying statute 318 and some of the other subparagraphs, D in particular, with some obligations to us as an entity. Perhaps we have that covered in another policy. I just didn't see that referenced here, so it may be a non-issue that I'm bringing up. However, the only point I was making is we're talking about notice to students, or notice to employees, which is something we have to do. But I do see obligations that would apply to us as an entity. So if we're going to be adopting certain parts of this statute or certain parts of the 2 CFR, I don't know why it would just be the ones relating to lunch. We have other grants, but be happy to follow up. Again, not in the best spot right here to cite the actual underlying statute, but I'd be happy to do so.
Dave, why don't we have Marge check in with Glenn on this, just to make sure we're capturing the essence of 2 CFR in its entirety? Is that
Great.
okay? Great.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Okay, so then we're going to move on to, I would just ask any board members watching, if you do have questions prior to our next board meeting for our first read, please send them in to myself and Marge and Alan so that we can be prepared to have answers for you. Our fourth item on the agenda is a discussion about a policy audit, and I'll pass it over to Dr. Adley to fill us in on that.
So thank you. Can you hear this on? So upon review of the policies with Marge, and Marge has done some good work between the last meeting and this meeting, trying to look at the actual policies. We have reviewed all of our documentation. One of our objectives here, obviously, is to make sure that we publicize the policies all on the website, and that is what we're actually trying to do, and that's really the goal of it. It was identified, actually I would say it was identified last year about policies and so on, given COVID and stuff, in terms of projects that are in the hopper. This is one that continues, as we look at it, to have a more comprehensive review. And the types of things that we'll be looking at is, well, actually, since the last time we have sort of codified to make sure that we are very clear what's on the website and what's in the manual. And we're very clear about that. Having spent some time going through some of them, it's generating some questions for us that we would like to frame and bring to the April meeting as a framework of looking at a policy audit review with the intention of either repealing, updating, what's the process for doing that, what's the timeline for doing that, what does it look like. Essentially, the process would probably in all likelihood take the summer to actually complete the whole thing thoroughly. But even as we go through them now at the moment, as we take one particular section, it's generating some questions for us, and I want to make sure that we're able to sort of frame that discussion for the board as to how it actually looks, what it's actually going to be entailed. And it seems simple to say just to update it, but there's a little bit more to it than that, and we'd like to sort of make sure that we just complete that process. It's actually a wee bit premature just to bring it to the board at the moment. I think we just need to rationalize some of the, because there are policies that existed for some time. And then there's also some simple stuff, like some of the policies are labeled alphabetically as opposed to numerically, and those types of things. Mark, do you want to talk any more about that? Or
No, I mean, I know that we brought this up before about a notebook full of policies that are not enforceable. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. I think, Marge and I have been talking about it for the last few years, and it's a big project and it will take some time. So I like the idea of sort of coming up with a framework in April and then setting to the work and doing the work over the summer. I think that's a very reasonable plan.
no,
Dave, anything? You good? Assuming it's good. Okay.
Agreed. Yes, good. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Is there any public comment? We don't have a lot of viewers, so no public comment. I will make a motion to adjourn. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Unanimous? Thank you.
Thank you.